He was covered in blood, pounding on my door at 3 in the morning, shouting my name. I froze. He looked terrified. Then he said something that still makes my heart race every time I think about it. He said, "They're coming for you next. Run. Now." And then he collapsed right there on my porch. My name is Harper Lane. I live alone in a quiet town in Oregon, where nothing ever happens. Until that night. The man who showed up bleeding at my door was Noah Briggs, my neighbor. He was kind, quiet, and used to be a firefighter. I never thought he'd be the reason I'd start running for my life. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe for more real-life stories like this one, and comment where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. It was a normal Friday night. Rain tapped against the windows, and I was sitting at my kitchen table grading my students' spelling tests. The house felt peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you feel safe. My mom, Ruth, had called earlier to remind me to lock my doors, like she always does. She worries too much, but that night, I was glad she did. After finishing my work, I made a cup of tea and scrolled through my phone. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a calm life again. Just a few months earlier, I had gone through a painful breakup, and I was finally starting to feel like myself. I even smiled when I saw the porch light shining outside. It felt like a small promise that everything was fine. Then came the first bang. It was sharp and desperate, echoing through the hallway. I jumped, spilling my tea all over the table. I waited, thinking maybe it was the wind or a branch. Then came another bang, louder this time. Someone was hitting the door, hard. I grabbed my phone and took a few steps toward the entryway. My heart was racing. Through the door, I heard a man's voice, panicked and weak. "Harper, please, open up." It was Noah, my neighbor. I hesitated. Noah was a good guy, always friendly, but hearing him shout like that at 3 in the morning was terrifying. I called out, "Noah, what's going on?" There was no answer, just a faint sound, like he was struggling to breathe. I unlocked the door with shaking hands. When I pulled it open, Noah nearly fell inside. His shirt was soaked with blood, and his eyes darted toward the street as if he expected someone to be there. I caught him before he hit the floor. "Oh my God, Noah, what happened?" He gripped my arm so tightly I could feel his hand trembling. His voice cracked as he whispered, "They know about you. They're coming. You have to run." I could barely process what he was saying. I looked outside, but the street was empty, just rain and shadows. "Who's coming?" I asked, my voice shaking. But before he could answer, his eyes rolled back, and he went completely still. I was kneeling on the floor, holding him, not knowing if he was alive. That was the moment I realized something was deeply wrong. The world I thought was safe had just shattered. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial my phone. Noah's blood was warm against my skin, and his breathing had turned shallow. I called 911, my voice trembling as I gave the dispatcher my address. She told me help was on the way, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the storm hammering the roof. When I hung up, I pressed a towel against his side to slow the bleeding. "Stay with me, Noah," I said, trying to sound calm. His eyelids fluttered, and he grabbed my wrist again with surprising strength. "Don't call them," he whispered, voice rough and broken. "Don't call the police. They're listening." I froze. "What are you talking about?" He coughed, blood spotting his lips. "They're not who they say they are. They know about you, about what you saw." My stomach dropped. "What I saw? Noah, I don't understand." His gaze was glassy, but he kept trying to speak. "It's all connected. The fire, the people who vanished. It wasn't an accident." He stopped, gasping, his hand slipping from mine. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing through every possibility. Maybe he'd hit his head. Maybe he was confused. But then something strange happened. The lights flickered once, twice, then went completely out. The house fell into darkness. For a moment, I just sat there, listening to the rain. Then I heard something outside, footsteps in the gravel driveway, slow, careful, like someone trying not to be heard. I crawled toward the window and pulled back the curtain. The motion light over my porch had gone out, but I could see a shape near the fence, a tall figure wearing something dark. I blinked, trying to focus, but when lightning flashed, the figure was gone. I locked the door. every muscle in my body tense. My phone buzzed, and I jumped. It was my mom calling. I swiped to answer. "Mom," I whispered. "Something's wrong. Noah's hurt, and there's someone outside." Her voice filled the line, thick with worry. "Harper, hang up and call the police again. Don't open the door for anyone. Do you hear me?" "I already called, but he said not to," I replied, pacing the living room. "He said they're listening." "Who's listening?" "Honey, you're scaring me." Before I could answer, I heard a sharp knock on the back door. It wasn't loud, but it was steady. 3 short taps. My throat went dry. "Mom, someone's at the back," I whispered. "Get out of the house," she said. "Now!" I didn't move. I was frozen. Another knock came, a little harder this time. I took a slow breath and walked toward the kitchen. The back door had a small window, fogged from the rain. I wiped it with my sleeve and peered outside. Nothing but darkness. When I turned around, Noah was gone. The towel, the blood on the floor, everything was still there, but he wasn't. I spun around, calling his name. "Noah!" My voice cracked. I ran toward the hallway, checking every room. Then I saw something that made my knees go weak. The front door was wide open, swinging slightly with the wind. The storm howled through the doorway, and the porch light flickered back on. There were footprints, wet, muddy, leading down the steps and out into the yard. I followed them with my eyes until they vanished near the fence. I wanted to run after him, but something deep inside told me not to. Instead, I slammed the door shut and locked it again. I pulled the curtains tight and turned on every light that still worked. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Near the doorframe, scratched into the wood, were letters. At first, I thought they were just marks, but when I looked closer, I could make them out. It said, "Check the basement." My chest tightened. Those were the last words Noah had said before he collapsed. I grabbed my flashlight, but the beam was weak. The battery icon on my phone was flashing red, only 2% left. I texted my mom quickly, "If you don't hear from me in 5 minutes, call the police again." Then I set the phone on the counter and took a deep breath. The air inside the house felt heavy now, like it was pressing against my skin. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creak of the floorboards, made me flinch. I could hear the wind outside, but underneath it was something else. A faint humming noise coming from under the floor. That's when I realized the sound wasn't the storm. It was coming from the basement. I stood at the top of the stairs, heart hammering in my chest, staring into the darkness below. A part of me wanted to run, to wait for help, but another part couldn't ignore what Noah had said. If there was something down there, something connected to him, to me, I needed to see it. I whispered to myself, "You can do this." My hand was shaking as I reached for the basement light switch. I flipped it, but nothing happened. The only light was from my flashlight, casting a thin, shaky beam down the steps. I took the first step, then another. The air grew colder with each one. The humming grew louder. At the bottom of the stairs, I stopped. There, behind the old water heater, was something half covered with a tarp. I pulled it back slowly. My breath caught in my throat. It was a small metal box, and on top of it was a piece of paper with my name written in red. And that was when I realized Noah's warning hadn't been a threat. It was a message. The storm outside was getting worse. Rain slammed against the windows, and thunder rolled through the hills like it was crawling closer every minute. I stood there, holding that small metal box with my name written on it, my hands shaking so hard I could barely keep it steady. My name, written in red ink. I didn't know whether it was blood or paint, but either way it made my stomach twist. I didn't want to open it, but I couldn't stop myself either. I sat on the bottom step of the basement stairs, the weak light from my flashlight flickering across the concrete floor. I slowly lifted the lid. Inside, there were photographs, old ones, some of me, some of my students, and one of Noah standing outside the burned-down house from the news. In one photo, I saw myself walking home from school, holding my coffee, with Noah in the background like he'd been following me. My hands started to sweat. For a second, I thought maybe Noah had been stalking me. Maybe he was the danger all along. But then I noticed something in the corner of one photo. A man in a black raincoat, standing near my mailbox, the same shape I'd seen outside earlier. Noah wasn't following me. He was following them. I felt a cold chill race up my back. I set the photos aside and looked deeper into the box. There were newspaper clippings, files, and a small flash drive wrapped in electrical tape. One of the papers had the word Project Ember printed at the top, along with a government logo I didn't recognize. Beneath it was a list of names, and mine was highlighted. Before I could think, my phone buzzed upstairs. I ran up the steps, almost tripping over the last one, and grabbed it from the counter. It was a text from my mom. "The police are on the way. Stay on the line with me." I called her right away. "Mom, I found something. I think Noah was trying to protect me," I said, my voice cracking. "What do you mean? Protect you from who?" she asked. "I don't know. There are pictures of me in this box and files with my name on them. Something called Project Ember." She paused. I could hear her breathing fast on the other end. "Harper, listen to me. Go to the police station right now. Don't wait for them to come to you." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay, I'll grab my keys." But then I froze. The power flickered again. The house went dark. The sound of rain outside was drowned out by something else. A faint thud coming from the back door. I held my breath. Another thud. Then a low scraping sound like metal against wood. Someone was trying to open it. "Mom," I whispered, clutching the phone tight. "Someone's here." "Get out, Harper," she said, her voice shaking. I turned toward the hallway, ready to run, but something caught my eye, a shadow moving near the basement door. My stomach twisted. It was standing perfectly still, just behind the frosted glass window in the door. I didn't think. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and stood there waiting. My flashlight was dim, but I aimed it toward the door. The shadow didn't move. I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3, and then yanked the door open. Nothing. The basement was empty. The air was freezing cold. I could see my breath as I stepped closer. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. That's when I saw it. Noah's notebook lying open on the floor near the bottom of the steps. I picked it up, flipping through the pages. It was full of sketches, maps, and numbers. On one page, there was a note written in big letters. "If you're reading this, they found me. Don't trust anyone in uniform." My body went numb. I didn't know what to believe anymore. I looked at the last page and saw a drawing of my street, with red X's marked over every house except mine. Underneath, it said, "She's next." I heard movement upstairs. Soft, careful footsteps. My front door creaked again. I turned off my flashlight and held my breath. The house was silent, except for the steady sound of rain. Then came a whisper, faint but clear, from somewhere above me. "Harper." I froze. It wasn't Noah's voice. It was lower, calmer, almost patient. I backed into the corner of the basement, clutching the knife. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, lighting up the dark. The screen showed a text from an unknown number. It read, "Stop looking." That was when I made up my mind. I wasn't waiting for the police, and I wasn't staying another second in that house. I grabbed the flash drive from the box, shoved the notebook into my jacket, and ran up the stairs. The front door was open again, swinging in the wind. I ran into the rain, barefoot, the cold cutting into my skin. The wind howled, thunder roared, and somewhere behind me, my mother was still shouting my name through the phone. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Because deep down, I already knew. If I did, I'd see whoever was waiting in that house, and I wasn't ready to face what I might find. I ran until my lungs burned. The rain was falling so hard, it felt like needles against my skin. My feet were freezing, my clothes soaked through, and my phone was barely working from the water. Every house I passed was dark, silent. No one came to the window. No one opened a door. It felt like the whole town had disappeared. I didn't stop running until I reached the old post office near Main Street. I ducked under the small awning and tried to catch my breath. My hands were trembling so bad I could hardly unlock my phone. I had one missed call from my mom and a text from an unknown number that said, "We warned you." My heart dropped. Whoever they were, they knew where I was. I looked around the empty street. The streetlights were flickering. and every shadow looked alive. My mom called again, and I answered right away. "Mom, I'm out. I'm safe, I think," I said, gasping for air. Her voice was shaky. "Honey, where are you? The police just called me. They said there was no one at your house when they arrived. Are you sure you're safe?" I froze. "No one was there," I asked, "but someone was inside. I heard them." "I don't know what's going on," she said, her voice cracking. "But they said the fire department is there now because the house caught fire." I pressed my hand against my mouth. "Fire? What do you mean fire?" She hesitated. "They said it spread fast. Harper, they think it started in the basement." My knees nearly gave out. The box, the flash drive, everything. Had it been rigged? Was it meant to destroy evidence? I stared down the dark road leading back to my house. Part of me wanted to run there and see for myself, but another part screamed not to. That's when I noticed something strange. Across the street, an old black SUV was parked with its engine still running. The driver's side window was down just enough for me to see a hand resting on the steering wheel. I squinted through the rain. The hand moved. I ducked behind the brick wall of the post office, holding my breath. The SUV lights turned off. A door opened. Footsteps splashed through puddles, slow and steady. I peeked out just enough to see a man in a black raincoat walking toward me. I grabbed my phone and whispered, "Mom, someone's coming." "Harper, listen to me. Run to the gas station down the road. I'm calling the police again." But before I could move, a voice called out from the darkness. "Harper Lane?" It was deep, calm, too calm. I didn't answer. I took one small step back. "I'm Agent Keller," he said. "I'm with the Bureau. You're not safe out here. We need to get you somewhere secure." Something about his voice made me hesitate. It wasn't the voice of a rescuer. It was the voice of someone rehearsed, someone used to being obeyed. He stepped closer, the streetlight hitting his face. He looked normal, clean cut, maybe in his 40s, but his eyes didn't look like someone who wanted to help. They looked empty. I shook my head. "Stay back," I said, holding up the knife I still had from my kitchen. He raised his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you, but if you know what was in that box, you need to come with me now. There are others looking for you." My pulse quickened. "How do you know about the box?" He didn't answer. He just smiled faintly. "Because we left it for you." My chest tightened. "What?" He took another step closer, his voice lower now. "We needed to see if Noah told you anything." "Did he?" It hit me like a punch. Noah hadn't been paranoid. He'd been hunted. They used him, maybe even planted him next to me. But why? The rain got heavier. A flash of lightning lit up the street, and in that moment, I saw another figure behind him, a woman, dressed the same way, standing completely still under the streetlight. "Harper," the man said softly, "come with us, or they'll find you first." "I don't trust you," I said, backing away. He sighed. "That's the wrong choice." Before I could react, something cracked against the side of the building. It sounded like a gunshot, but sharper. The man ducked, pulling something from his coat. The woman shouted, "Move!" I ran. I didn't look back. I sprinted down the road toward the gas station, heart racing, shoes slipping on the wet pavement. I could hear them shouting, behind me, their footsteps pounding against the asphalt. When I reached the station, the lights were still on. I burst through the glass door, shouting, "Please help me!" The cashier, a young guy no older than 20, looked startled. "Ma'am, what happened?" I turned around, expecting to see the agents right behind me, but the parking lot was empty. No SUV, no footsteps, just rain. "Someone was chasing me," I said, panting. "Call the police." He nodded quickly, picking up the phone. But when he dialed, there was no dial tone. He tapped the receiver. "That's weird. The lines are dead." A chill ran through me. I pulled out my phone. It had no signal either. The storm shouldn't have been that bad. Then I noticed something glowing on the counter. A small black device, blinking red. I pointed at it. "What's that?" He frowned. "Oh, that? Some guys came by earlier, said they were checking for storm interference. Left that thing to track power surges, I think." My stomach dropped. I knew what it was. It wasn't tracking power. It was tracking me. Before I could say anything, the door creaked open. 2 people walked in. wearing black raincoats, dripping wet, the same ones I'd seen outside my house. I whispered to the cashier, "Get out of here." He didn't move. One of the figures stepped forward, pulling down her hood. It was the same woman from the streetlight. Her voice was calm. "You should have stayed home, Harper." I backed away slowly. The knife in my hand felt small now, useless. My heartbeat drowned out everything else. She smiled slightly. "Don't worry, it'll be quick." And then, before she could take another step, bright red lights flashed through the windows. Sirens. The police. They turned toward the sound, but when I blinked, they were gone, vanished like shadows into the storm. I ran outside, falling to my knees as the officers rushed toward me. Behind them, through the sheets of rain, I saw smoke rising from the hill where my house used to be, flames tearing through what was left. And in that moment, I finally understood. Noah had been right. The fire wasn't to destroy evidence. It was to erase me. When I woke up, everything smelled like smoke. My throat was dry, my chest hurt, and for a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I saw the white walls, the IV in my arm, and my mom sitting beside my hospital bed, her head resting against her hand. Her eyes were red from crying. When she noticed I was awake, she jumped up and held me like she thought I might disappear. "You're okay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're safe now." But I didn't feel safe. I didn't even feel alive. My body was shaking. My heart still stuck in that night. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked at me, hesitating. "The police said they found you outside the gas station, unconscious. They brought you here. The house burned down completely. They couldn't save anything." I stared at her, trying to process the words. "And the people who were after me? Did they catch them?" Her face changed. She looked away. "The officers said there was no sign of anyone else. Just you. Just me." The words hit hard. Everything I'd seen, everything I'd heard, it was like it had been wiped clean. No Noah, no agents, no evidence, only ashes. I turned toward the window. The morning light was pale and cold, cutting through the fog outside. I could see black smoke rising from the hill where my house used to be. Fire trucks still parked around the ruins, their red lights flashing like fading memories. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined all of it. Maybe Noah's warning was just a dream. But then I saw the small plastic evidence bag sitting on the nightstand beside me. Inside was a flash drive, burned at the edges, but still intact. I reached for it. "They found this in my jacket pocket," my mom said quietly. "They said it might belong to you." I held it in my hand, my fingers trembling. It was real. Noah's flash drive, the proof he'd risked his life to give me. Later that day, a detective came to talk to me. He was calm, polite, but his questions didn't sit right. "Miss Lane," he said, pulling out his notepad, "can you tell me exactly what you remember from last night?" I told him about Noah, about the box, the fire, the people in the raincoats, and the files labeled Project Ember. He listened carefully, but didn't write much down. When I mentioned the flash drive, his eyes flicked toward it for half a second before he smiled. "We'll make sure that gets looked at," he said, his voice too smooth. When he left the room, my mom whispered, "Did you see his badge number?" It looked off. I nodded. I had noticed it too. It wasn't like the others. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. The beep of a heart monitor, the distant footsteps in the hallway, the hum of the lights. I kept thinking about Noah, about how he showed up bleeding, terrified, but still strong enough to warn me. I wanted to believe his death meant something, that his sacrifice mattered. When the nurse came in to check on me, I asked if I could use the hospital computer for a school project. She smiled and said sure. As soon as she left, I plugged in the flash drive. At first, nothing happened. Then a single folder appeared on the screen labeled Ember Logs. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were dozens of video files, timestamps, names, and what looked like surveillance footage. I clicked on the first one. The video showed a small, dimly lit room. A child sat in the corner, hooked up to machines, crying softly. A voice off-screen said, "Subject 12 responding to environmental stress. Prepare the next test." I covered my mouth, tears filling my eyes. The date in the corner was from a year ago, around the time one of my students, Lila, had suddenly been pulled from school without explanation. My chest tightened. Noah had been right. It was all connected. The fire, the missing people, the lies. They'd been experimenting on children, and now they wanted to bury it. Before I could click another file, the computer screen went black. Then a message flashed in white letters. Unauthorized access detected. I yanked the flash drive out and stuffed it under my pillow, heart pounding. I knew then that they were still watching. They hadn't finished what they started. A few hours later, as the hospital grew quiet, I looked out the window again. In the parking lot below, under a flickering streetlight, a black SUV was parked. The same one from that night. Its headlights were off, but I could see a figure sitting in the driver's seat, facing the hospital. I whispered to myself, "You're not done yet, Harper." The next morning, I signed myself out of the hospital against the doctor's advice. My mom begged me to stay, but I couldn't. I told her I was going to stay with a friend, but that wasn't true. I was going back to find out what really happened, to finish what Noah started. Before I left, I looked at my reflection in the hospital mirror. My face was pale, my eyes tired, but something inside me had changed. I wasn't the same person who graded spelling tests by candlelight and laughed at my mom's paranoia. I'd seen what hid in the dark, and I couldn't unsee it. As I walked out into the morning sun, I looked back at the hospital once more. The smoke had cleared, but the fear hadn't. Somewhere, those people were still out there, watching, waiting. And if they wanted me to stop asking questions, they'd have to come find me again. If you want to know what happens next, make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story isn't over yet.